You're lucky to have an expert on hand to lead us through the process, and that amazing person is the great Sybil Yang. Sybil is an associate professor in the Department of Hospitality and Tourism Management at SF State's Lamb Family College of Business. Being a native Californian, created and fostered her love of food and the outdoors. We give just an example of some of her hobbies: mountaineering, rock climbing, sailing, springboard diving. She started her academic career by earning her Bachelor of Science degree at Cal, and then continued all the way through and earned her PhD at Cornell University. She taught menu development at the Culinary Institute of America, has baked bread for Arizmendi, and was a chef at Wente Vineyards. Her design and pricing recommendations have been directly implemented on hundreds of menus across the United States, and she's been featured in the Wall Street Journal and Women's Health magazine. And luckily for us, in the couple of hours she has left in the day, she's here to teach us tonight how to prepare Sichuan spicy wontons and scallion pancakes. It is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Professor Chef Sybil Yang.
Oh my God. So thank you, Nicole, on that. So welcome. Preparing for the happy Lunar New Year. These are two of my favorite snacks in the world. And when I, told a couple of friends that these were the recipes that we were going to profile for the alumni for San Francisco State, I started getting a lot of questions, and I didn't know the answer to a lot of them. And so between the time when Ken's team, started putting the film bug and the concept bug into my brain, up until now, I have been making so many iterations, especially of the scallion pancakes. And so there are a few hints and tips and tricks that from the time of filming, from friends' suggestions, I've tried out and can give you guys some really good feedback on after watching the video in that little Q&A session time. But in the meantime, watch, have fun. I will be in the chat answering you guys' questions, so you can either throw it in the Q&A or throw it in the chat. And if you're curious, I'm actually Year of the Dragon, the very tail end of the dragon. So even though people typically say go by the calendar year, remember it's the lunar calendar year. So if your birthday is in January sometime, you are part of the previous Western calendar year animal. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, enjoy. Yeah, Year of the Dragon, right? Okay, well, enjoy. So today we'll be making red chili oil wontons, some of my absolute favorite things to eat. The red chili oil part is a complete condiment, and we won't be making that today. If you do want to see that being made, let Ken Mashiro know, and we'll set up another video for that. But for today, we're just going to go ahead and make the wonton part. And we're going to make one specific type of wonton, but realize that you can really change up the filling of the wontons to whatever you want. I'm going to make a classic filling today, which is a split of pork and shrimp, and actually some fish. I just need to get rid of the fish. But traditionally, wonton fillings are a mix of pork and shrimp. I'm going to go ahead and grind my meat. You don't have to grind your own meat. You can buy pre-ground pork if you want to. However, for the seafood part, you're not really going to find pre-ground seafood. And so for the seafood part, you can just chop it up by hand into a very fine mince. It doesn't need to look good because we're going to pretty much puree it all anyways. You'll see. But let's take a gander at the grinder. Okay. So what we have here is the KitchenAid meat grinder sausage maker, and I've already prepped my meat, and the pork I'm using is just pork shoulder. So I'm just gonna gratuitously use my hands. Pork, butt or shoulder, it doesn't really matter, cut into strips. I have a mix of shrimp and then just randomly some white cod that I need to get rid of. So I'm throwing some cod in there as well. You don't have to grind your own meat. I just choose to go ahead and do this. If you buy pre-ground pork, I don't think there's anywhere where you're gonna be able to find like pre-ground seafood. You can just use a Cuisinart, a food processor, and process all the proteins together, or you can just manually chop and put it into a fine mince with a knife. I'm gonna set the setting to stir, which is number 1, and I'm just gonna go ahead and start feeding into the grinder. This is gonna look lovely. This is like the best. One of the reasons why you want the meat cut into strips is there's a worm wheel in the grinder, and if you cut it into strips, the worm wheel will pull the strip of meat through, and it's just easier for the grinder to work. If you cut it up into cubes, the worm wheel, yeah, you have to work a little bit harder to get the meat through the grinder. The recipe calls for ginger, and what I just have here is about an inch of ginger. I don't even bother grating it. I just toss it in there as well and let the grinder take care of it. And if you can actually have the seafood semi-frozen, it'll actually go through the grinder a lot more easily. So you can start seeing that some of that ginger is coming through now. The recipe also calls for scallions, and I'm not even going to bother chopping up the scallions, just the length of scallions. I'm going to go ahead and shove in also. Okay, and I'm at the end of my feeder, and I'll just wait for the rest of this to process through. And I think we're at the end. Okay, I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to go ahead and wash my hands. Okay, KitchenAid all put away, and we have our grind right here. Nothing's mixed in yet, and you're going to be shocked at how simple this is. Toss everything into the same bowl. So I have my salt, have my soy sauce. I think this is low sodium soy sauce, but realistically, I don't remember. It's soy sauce. Just like when you make sausages, you can test a little bit of the filling in a fry pan, and then adjust the seasoning, add more salt as needed. But you can hold off on the salt if you want to, but to your taste level. This is sesame oil. I'm not using black sesame oil. No need to use the more expensive stuff here. This is white pepper. You have to have white pepper. So do not substitute black pepper. It just will not taste the same. And a single egg. And just like with most fillings in Western cuisine, the egg serves as a binder. You can really use whatever you have handy, but what we're going to do is we're just going to mix this all together. We want this to become almost paste-like. And this extra stirring, where you start getting like threads, where you don't see the individual grains of the meat and the seafood, that's going to help the filling stick to itself inside the wonton, and it'll also help you get that chewy, almost bouncy texture. Okay, so it's now to a point where it's not crumbly blobs of meat. I can literally take a blob out, and it just kind of sticks to it. It just kind of sticks to itself. Yeah, that's the texture that you're looking for. We're not going to make our own wonton wrappers. Frankly, it's It's way more complicated than it's worth. A pack like this is literally $2. You'll find wontons that are, these are thin wrapper wontons, so it says thin, oops, thin over here. You'll see thick and then you'll see medium. Get the thin ones. The thick ones people generally use for those like the crispy thingies that you dip in the sauce at the super Americanized Chinese restaurants. Don't get the thick ones, get the super thin ones. I have my little wrapping station here. A place to put it, have my filling, and have my wrappers here. Okay, let's make sure that you can actually see what's going on. What I'm gonna do is, you don't want to overstuff these wontons. I'm going to use, this is probably a teaspoon and a half maybe. You want the footprint to be about the size of a quarter. Okay, just in the center of the wonton wrapper like this. Put your chopsticks in the middle, turn it upside down, be very delicate. Grab the base and pull out the chopsticks. Wonton. I told you it was simple. So about a quarter, footprint of a quarter. And I rest the chopsticks, turn it upside down, squish, and there's my wonton. You don't need water or egg to make the dough stick to itself. There's enough sticky, proteiny residue on your chopsticks where that helps to keep the wonton itself closed. If you don't have chopsticks, I don't know, maybe if you have dowels at home, you can use a couple of the thin dowels. Honestly, I don't know how you would make it without chopsticks. If you accidentally bought the medium or the thick peels, I would say hold off. It doesn't make for a tasty wonton. Those are really meant for frying. Okay, so you want to bring plenty of water up to a boil and then kind of take it from a big old rolling boil down just a little bit, maybe a couple of bubbles is okay, but you don't want a big full rolling boil because these wontons are fairly delicate. This is a good state to have your water, a little bit of rippling. Go ahead and put the dumplings in. You're not going to be able to eat all of these wontons at once, at least I really hope not. About 10 of them is a good sized portion. I'm going to bring this back up because the wontons drop the temperature of the water. And just like with most dumplings or even the frozen dumplings that you might buy at the supermarket, they'll float once they're done. No need to salt the water. It's not like pasta, and because there's already filling in there, and the filling is salty enough to compensate for the very plain dough. So now you see that they have pretty much all floated up to the top of the water. I'm gonna take this down, use the spider, shake off some of that excess water, and put it straight into my serving bowl. So here are our wontons out of the water, and now to just kind of put on some condiments, I'm just going to put a little bit of soy sauce on the top, some vinegar here. You can use black vinegar. That's actually the more traditional version, but I keep apple cider vinegar on hand. Try not to use white vinegar, that one's a little harsh. And the pièce de résistance, which is l'encamma, which is old godmother. This stuff, if you go to Dean and DeLuca, there's a fried chili oil
This stuff is way better and way cheaper. And then finish it off with a little bit of cilantro. Just a rough chop. There you have it, is hot chili oil wontons. So now we're gonna make green scallion pancakes. The mixing and the actual making of the pancake itself isn't all that difficult. The real secret comes when we're gonna fry this thing up inside the pan. So let's get to it. Super tasty, super easy. We're gonna start off with 1 cup of all-purpose flour. To this cup of all-purpose flour, we're gonna add boiling water. What adding boiling water does is it quickly hydrates the starch. So the starch sucks up all the hot water. By adding hot water, no matter how much we manipulate this dough, it's not going to be rubbery and chewy the way that a sourdough bread will end up being rubbery and chewy. It makes a very strong dough, but not chewy or rubbery in that sense, because there's no gluten, there's very little gluten formation because so much of the water is being used for starch gelatinization. So at this point, I'm just kind of using the dough ball to clean the bowl. And this is just hot water and flour, right? There's not even salt in here. We're gonna add salt inside the filling. And now I'm just gonna start kneading the dough so that I get a smooth texture. It's not going to feel dry. It's definitely not a wet dough, but it's going to feel drier than like maybe if you're making pizza dough or bread dough, and that's fine. Okay, so once we have a little ball like this, right, with 1 cup of flour, it's going to make 2 scallion pancakes. So rather than portion after the dough is rested, I'm just going to portion now. And I'll have 2 balls of dough, nice and round. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and take the mixing bowl and cover it and let it rest so that whatever gluten has formed gets to relax a little bit. I'll go ahead and let this rest for 20 minutes to half an hour. Okay, at this point, the dough has rested, and now it's time to roll out the dough. Now, we're gonna roll it out once into one big old flat piece, and it's up to you how you want to roll, but I roll this out by lifting in between each movement, just to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bench. And I'm also not rolling off of the edge of the dough like that, because that will just smear the dough into the butcher block and make for a very uneven roll. Okay, and this is about 10 inches in diameter at this point. We're going to put a little bit of olive oil, whatever oil really that you want. This is maybe a healthy ½ teaspoon. On top of the oil, I put on a layer of salt, thin layer of salt, about the equivalent of maybe a ¼ teaspoon, 1/8 to ¼ teaspoon, just depending on how salty you like things. Sprinkle with your green onions. If you like to go a little heavy on the green onions, no worries. And now we're just going to roll this up like a jelly roll. Okay, so as I roll, I'm gonna tug a little bit just to kind of thin out the dough as I roll. I want a somewhat tight roll. So now I kind of have my little rope here, and we're just going to roll this. And as I roll, I'm making a cupping motion with my fingers like this, And as I roll, I'm going to kind of pull outwards also. So the idea is I want to slowly roll this rope, roll and stretch this rope to about 2 feet in length, 24 inches or 2 feet in length. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to start rolling. Start rolling this like a little Princess Leia bun. Just like a little snail roll here. And at this point, you know, if you made a 3-cup of flour batch of this dough, you can literally take these coils and cover them tightly, wrap them tightly with saran wrap, and freeze them if you want to. And that way, when you're ready to eat them and cook them, just take them out of the freezer, defrost for about half an hour, and then you can roll them out into a flatter pancake. Or you can go ahead and rest them for about 30 minutes, and then come back and, you know, start cooking them off. For now, I'll just go ahead and put them into some plastic, and then we will come back, we'll roll them again, and then cook them off. Okay, so our dough has chilled for a bit in the refrigerator, got a chance to rest. And I'm just gonna take one out, and it'll be a little tacky, but it won't necessarily stick to whatever it is that we're rolling. But just to be careful, just like how you would roll out tortillas, if you've ever made your own tortilla, I would go ahead and put it between 2 pieces of plastic film. So here I've just cut up a old Ziploc bag, and we're going to roll it out between the layers of the Ziploc bag. And I like to roll outward from the center. And you don't want to roll this too thin. Well, if you want a really crispy scallion pancake, go ahead and roll this out thin, meaning about the thickness of a quarter. Don't go like to the thinness of a dime, because that'll be way too thin and you'll start losing the layers. Now, you can do all the work up to this point and then keep it in the refrigerator or keep it in the freezer and pull out whenever you're ready to go ahead and fry up a pancake and have a tasty snack. Or you can just directly, after rolling, go ahead and fry it up in a frying pan. So let's go fry these things up now. I'm using a nonstick pan. And whichever pan you end up using, make sure that it's a pan where you have a lid where you can cover the entire surface of the frying pan. We're going to start off on high heat. Put down about a teaspoon of oil, whichever oil you choose to pan fry with. I'm just using a little bit of olive oil. So just out of the fridge, I'm going to pull one side of the plastic wrap off of it. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to peel the other side of the plastic off. So peel the plastic off of the pancake. Do not peel the pancake off of the plastic. We're not going to get to so high of a heat where we're going to scorch or smoke the oil at all. So extra virgin olive oil is fine. So you'll also notice that the oil will start to shimmer a little bit, and make sure that the bottom is completely coated. And now I'm going to turn the heat down just slightly. It's still medium-high-ish. And just like with making pancakes, like regular pancakes, you're going to have to learn the temperature of your stove and your pan to kind of gauge what high heat and medium high actually mean for your stove. The objective here is really to get a little bit of golden brown on the bottom of the pancake. So now I'm going to turn this down to low heat. So on my stove, I'm taking it down to about a 3, and I'm going to put the lid on. Now that you've got a little bit of crisp golden brownedness on the bottom of the pancake, you want to almost steam the entire pancake so that the center of the pancake cooks through. We'll let this go for about 5 minutes, And we'll check on it occasionally, but you don't want to check on it too much because you want to keep the steam underneath the cover. Okay, so I've now flipped over the scallion pancake and added in a little bit of additional olive oil. Okay. And you want to loosen up the texture of the scallion pancake. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just kind of squish, and I'm making my motion perpendicular to the direction of the coils, right? And the objective here really is to kind of loosen up the layers of this coil. The last thing you want is like a dense scallion pancake. And this is just one of the, you know, unspoken keys to creating a fluffier, a looser layered scallion pancake. And we're just gonna wait for this to brown. I've brought up the heat again to about a 6-7 level on my stove. So medium high-ish type of heat, because our objective right now is to brown the bottom side, the second side of the scallion pancake. And just, you know, occasionally go back and check for the coloring, and you want a nice golden brown color on the second side of the scallion pancake. You can already kind of hear that sizzling. It's me being impatient right now. So this will take a couple of minutes. If you plan on eating it like immediately, you can take this time to make yourself a dipping sauce if that's the way you like to eat your scallion pancakes. Traditional dipping sauces are generally a mix of soy sauce, vinegar, like a sweet-ish type of vinegar, so black vinegar or an apple cider vinegar, which is what I usually keep around, sriracha, cilantro, and if you like the flavor of sesame oil, like maybe a drop or two of sesame oil, that stuff is really very potent and strong in terms of flavor, so you don't need a lot of sesame oil. And if you don't plan on talking to anybody for the next day or so, I would probably also chop up or mince a single clove of garlic and throw that into the dipping sauce as well. Okay, let's check on that. That's a little bit better in terms of color. And just like pancakes, that second side is never really going to look as good as the first side of the pancake. So just kind of keep that in mind. Okay. So now that I have the desired color, my desired color on the scallion pancake on the bottom side here, I'm just going to take this directly off of heat onto my serving vessel here. And we're going to go ahead and chop this up now. And you'll see how this scallion pancake is in loose layers, right? And that's all the coiled layers that we put together. And this is the sign of a good scallion pancake, where it's not just like, you know, something super dense, it's in several layers in between. And again, these layers are just like the typical laminated dough layers that you find when people make puff pastries in traditional French and Western cuisines. Okay, and just kind of hear the crunchiness. And I'm just going to start noshing down. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you'll be making scallion pancakes in the future. I'm talking with my mouth open, but you can't see it, so that's okay. And hopefully this will be a nice little accompaniment to the next time that you order your takeout Chinese. Okay, enjoy one of my favorite snacks.
Okay, hello, welcome back. So there were a couple of questions inside the chat, one of which I wasn't completely able to answer, but I'm going to try to show you guys here. One of the questions was, can you wrap the wontons in a slightly fancier way? And yes, you can. So the chopstick method was just the simplest, fastest method used to wrap wontons. Another very traditional way is to wrap it the same way that tortellini are wrapped. And so if this is your wonton wrapper, put the filling, oops, there goes my filling. Put the filling in the center, and hopefully you guys can see it. Put the filling in the center, fold it up in the diagonal, and then just like with the tortellini, fold it up inward and match the two corners together. And so it looks like a little bishop's hat. And then give this a firm pinch, and the meat paste and the wonton skin will hold that pinch in place. And that's a fancier looking version of the wonton. And how do the pancakes taste with the laogamma? It tastes freaking fantastic. In the recipe type-up sheet that Ken's office will be posting up for you guys, it'll teach you guys how to make like a dipping sauce. And I didn't put volume amounts for the dipping sauce because it really is up to you. But the dipping sauce that I usually like to use with anything and everything, so everything from pot stickers to buns to even scallion pancakes, is soy sauce, a sweet-ish type of vinegar like a apple cider vinegar, a little bit of sesame oil if you're into that, cilantro, because I like cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, you can also use chopped up scallions, and then a big old heaping spoonful of either sriracha or laogamma in there for the sauce, and just kind of mix it all up. Adjust the acidity and the saltiness to your taste, but that's just a very classic simple dipping sauce to use. And again, chopped garlic if you're not going to talk to anybody. Boiling the wontons, I boil them all together. It would take hella long for you to boil them a single at a time. But just like with pasta, you want to make sure that the pot is big enough to have enough water inside of it so that the pot stickers are free to move around inside the water. So they're not all crammed in there. And because if they're all crammed in there, they are way more likely to stick to each other. So I usually boil enough where I can see that the wontons are free floating inside the water and not really touching each other. I wouldn't steam these wontons just because the skin is so delicate. So the wonton skins that I really like are the really thin ones. Those are, for me, the most pleasurable ones to eat, especially if you have them in a soup or if you have them like in a sauce in a bowl like this. I don't know about steaming wontons. I can't really say that I've ever heard of anybody steaming wontons. They're generally just boiled and then lifted out of the boiling water. Wow, meals that are eaten with the scallion pancakes. I don't know, every single meal could have like scallion pancakes with it as far as I'm concerned. And yes, the wontons can be frozen and saved. And as a matter of fact, I'll just pull it out from my freezer, I just freeze them in a tray like this. And when you're ready to use them, you just like literally, they're like nice and hard, and I don't think you can hear that, but they're very frozen. And you can just pop the frozen wontons directly into the boiling water and then cook them the same way, just until they float. No need to defrost or anything like that. Yes, you can use whole wheat flour with the pancake, with the scallion pancake dough. I wouldn't replace it completely with like whole wheat flour that has too much of the bran inside of it, just because it will make the dough a little too fragile. The bran particles might, weaken the super thin layers. So maybe at the most substitute out half of the flour with the whole wheat flour. The heating in the pan sequence. Yeah, so for the scallion pancakes, use a non-stick pan. Bring the nonstick pan up to high heat with oil inside of it, and you'll know what high heat is if you spray a little bit of water into the pan, that the water will immediately, you know, turn into steam and pop. So high heat, put the pancake down into the pan, and it wasn't completely clear inside the video, oops, but I'll emphasize it, is with your rolled out scallion pancake, right, and this is just in a random piece of plastic, you want to pull the plastic off of the pancake like this, like roll the plastic off of the pancake on one side and then the other side. Don't try to peel the pancake itself off of the plastic. Peel the plastic off of the pancake, and then I just flipped it out onto my hand, and then I can pull the plastic off of the pancake completely, and then just I'll flip this onto the pan itself. Then on high heat, once that first side down on the pan is nice and golden brown, oil up the top, the uncooked side of the scallion pancake with more oil. There's a lot of oil in this. And then flip the pancake over. Flip the pancake over, put the lid on, and turn the heat down. And the objective behind that is you want to turn the heat down and have it, like, you know, lidded up, because you want the steam from the pancake to kind of steam the inside of the pancake through. You don't want a raw pancake inside the center. And actually, one of the questions asked, like, you know, when you go to dim sum, why the scallion pancakes, the center is, you know, very clear. It's very clear when the flour has completely gelatinized and set and cooked through. So you know if the inside of your pancake is overly opaque, that you haven't steamed it enough. You haven't cooked it for long enough underneath the lid. Almond flour or gluten flour? Unfortunately not. So you do still need some gluten to the dough, so that the dough can stretch to become that thin. So unfortunately, almond flour or gluten flour, it just won't hold together well enough to use. Sorry. In wonton version 3, do you boil the wonton in water or chicken broth? You can do either. You can do either. If you boil the wonton directly inside chicken broth, be prepared to have that excess flour that's on the wonton peel kind of work its way into your chicken broth and cloudy up and thicken up your chicken broth a little bit. That's really the only reason why most restaurants will boil the wonton in a clear water and then put the cooked wonton into the broth before cooking. The boiling water to flour ratio is, you want 1/3 the volume of the flour. Would you recommend as a substitute for vegan wontons? I am not an expert on this, especially in like vegan fillings, but tofu will work. There were a couple of questions in the Q&A earlier on. If you do use a tofu, use a drier tofu. Don't use the super fresh stuff that's like packed in water and kind of floating, and don't use like the UTH Tetra Pak tofu either, because those are just too crumbly. You want like a dried tofu. Like in Chinese, it's a tofu gan, and gan is like dried. So the stuff that has kind of like the almost like the texture of tempeh, that would be preferable to like the soft silken stuff. Yeah, I would say give the Beyond Meat stuff a shot for the inside of the wonton fillings, because those proteins will behave more like, you know, meat proteins than say a traditional tofu would. Yeah. Wow, the whole pancake is white. I'm not sure that I've seen scallion pancakes where the whole thing is white. Yeah. For the scallion pancake, so after I roll it up into like that little Princess Leia roll, you can let it rest for as long as you want to, but at a minimum, maybe about 20 minutes. Yeah. Impossible beef. Shrimp is real. Keep poking. Oh, if you keep on poking through the wonton wrappers, pile up the filling as a mound on top of the wonton wrapper, and then be very, very gentle. Use really fat chopsticks if you need to. and use the filling as like a cushion between the wrapper and the tips of your chopstick. Try doing that. The other thing you can do is you can also rest the entire thing on the counter or on the bench, and then try to bundle up and keep the chopsticks up like this and bundle up the wonton wrapper around it and then pull the chopstick out like that. Yes, thank you for the homegrown like green onions. Mine are actually homegrown green onions also. One of the easiest things to replant in your garden. So yeah. Okay. I don't know. Are there any more questions? Good noodles to go with wontons. The classic Cantonese style for those noodles, they're egg noodles. They are thin egg noodles. And that chewy, bouncy texture of the noodles, that makes my day, especially if it's like a really cold day. No joy on the gluten-free flour for the scallion pancakes. You need the gluten to be able to provide some stretch and rubberiness so that you can actually roll the dough to be like relatively thin. Yeah, but nobody asked this, but I'm going to throw it in there because it's kind of a little cheat that I've since found out is if you're not comfortable rolling out the dough yourself, you can actually use a pasta roller. So after you've made just the plain raw dough, if you have like a pasta making attachment for your KitchenAid, or you have a hand crank pasta maker, if you roll the dough all the way down to 0, right, the 0 setting, you can kind of use that, oil up your sheet of dough, of rolled out dough, salt, sprinkle scallions, and then fold it in half, and then roll at like a jelly roll from there, and then coil. So you can also use a pasta roller. You don't have to try to roll it out by hand. And pro tip, the dough for the scallion pancake, if you really wanted to, you could make wonton wrappers with the same dough, and then just use a pasta roller and then roll it down to 0. And then cut it into a 3x3 square. It's the same hot water crust dough. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. The salt does not go in with the flour when you're making this. When you're making the scallion pancakes, what you want to do is roll out the dough, oil the dough, and then sprinkle the salt as a layer. And then sprinkle your scallions. So that's where the salt is. It's actually not inside the dough. Soda into the wonton wrappers. Like a baking soda into the wonton wrappers. I guess that's in an attempt to try to make it like chewy and bouncy in texture. You can certainly try. I haven't tried it. It's worth an experiment though. I wish I could provide a better answer than that. If you're trying to give it, the wonton wrapper, a chewier texture, you can also put an egg in there. So instead of like, you know, 1/3 of a cup of boiling water, you might want to take 2 ounces of water out of that and put an egg in there, and that'll give you a firmer, chewier texture. Okay. Have we answered everything? What other fillings? The Beyond Meats, my grandmother is particularly partial to an all seafood version. So a mixture of a firm fish and shrimp in there. There are also traditional versions that use like chicken, and they're like ramps. It's like a scallion ramp looking thing, but it's a green leafy vegetable. You can pile in the green leafy vegetables into the wonton filling if you want to. All you have to do with the vegetable though is parboil and then squeeze out as much excess water as you can out of the vegetable. What you really don't want inside the filling is for the filling to be too wet. And so if you add in a lot of vegetables, just make sure that the vegetables have like lost some of their water in a way. Yeah, like pork and shrimp, Alicia. Yeah, pork and shrimp is the classic, super not kosher, but super classic filling to have in wontons. Yeah. Okay. What is the medium texture wonton for? Yeah, the medium and the thick wonton skins, they're generally used to either fry up for the crispy, crunchy thingies that you get at super Americanized Chinese restaurants, or they're used to wrap some wonton that's going to be fried. So because those need a firmer texture to them. The thin stuff is for the soups. Yeah. Yeah, the medium and the thick stuff is generally for frying. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, scallion pancakes, you know, even if you mess up, right? Because it's going to be a learning curve to like learn how to roll that thing out very thin. It's going to be a learning curve to find out what the appropriate temperatures are on your stove. But even the mess ups taste fantastic. So. Yay.
Let me see. Hi, Nicole. I'm coming back to, I think you've done us I'm trying to see if there were any final questions. There was, did we answer this about repeating what you said about cutting out some of the water for wontons?
Oh yeah, you want to make sure that if you put vegetables inside your wonton, or even if you use tofu, in your wontons, you just want to make sure that the filling isn't wet. So if you're going to use something like spinach actually has a lot of water in it. If you use mushrooms have a lot of water in it. So what I would recommend is you cook those vegetables or you cook those mushrooms first so that some of the water comes out of it. And then drain off some of that water. So if you're using mushrooms, actually, so for you vegans out there, that's actually not a bad idea, is you can saute up the mushrooms and essentially make what's a duxelle, right? A reduced mushroom chop almost, and have that as your filling. But you just don't want a soggy filling because the wrapper itself is already so thin. Yeah.
Understood. It looks like we have 2 more questions maybe we can get in before we wrap up. Someone was asking if they have extra filling before you, I think, maybe ran it out of the wrappers. What do you do with that?
Yeah, that's always a problem. I would say kind of gauge as you're wrapping, right? A little bigger, a little smaller as you go. But you can also just like, you know, saute it up like a sausage pancake, almost like sausage patty afterwards. You know, it also works out.
Sounds delicious. I would do that.
Right.
And finally, it says, if I shape the scallion pancakes differently, will it affect the taste or texture of the final product?
You know something? Thicker versions are fine, right? So what you're going to get with the thicker version is you're probably going to have to cook it with the lid on for a little bit longer because it'll take a little bit longer for the steam to steam through the rest of the scallion pancake. Yeah, thicker versions are great. But what I would do with the thicker version, and I'll actually tilt my camera to you guys, what I did with this batch over here, I'm gonna try to, what I did with this batch over here is I used the pasta roller, and these lines that you see is, I actually used a pie crust rolling tool that makes slits. You can just take a paring knife and make slits here. If you're gonna make a thicker scallion pancake, I would cut slits. And that will make for a stringier texture on your scallion pancake. So it's not like a thick, it doesn't end up being like a thick, pancake, that it'll still be very stringy and fluffy on the inside. And, you know, with this sheet, similarly, roll it up like a jelly roll and then twist it up inside a Princess Leia bun. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think maybe I'll make this the last question. Someone was asking if you could use the same dough to make a bun, and if not, I think our next tutorial might be on making buns. So if the answer is no, then
it depends on what kind of bun, but generally no. So if you're thinking about those steamed puffy buns, those are yeast leavened buns, and this is not the dough for it. If you're thinking about salping youtiao, which is like a sesame covered, very flat baked bun bread looking thing, almost pita looking thing that you put fried oil sticks into, that's this dough. It's the same type of dough. But if you're thinking the steamed buns or the xiaolong ball buns, the soup buns, they're different wrappers.
Well, I think then we're going to wrap this up tonight. I wanted to say a special thank you. I noticed that your our dean for the Lamb Family College of Business joined us tonight. So welcome, Dean Sybil. And I wanted to reiterate that if you want to stay connected with the Alumni Association, visit us at connect.sfsu.edu. If you want more information about the Lamb Family College of Business, where you can find Sybil, that is at cob.sfsu.edu. And one of the things I just love most about having Sybil Yang present is no matter how much I hype her up, she always over delivers. Like I can't, there's not enough superlatives to say what you're always in for when she joins us. So thank you all for spending some of your Thursday evening with you. We hope you enjoyed this. We plan to come back with more, and we hope Sybil will come back. It sounds like there are a lot of more ideas out there about what we can do next. And but for now, thank you. Have a wonderful night. Go Gators.